When I moved into the faded old apartment block on the edge of town, I wasn't expecting much, just peace and distance from the chaos I'd left behind. The scars from a past relationship still itched beneath my skin, and the silence of my new home felt more like a balm than loneliness. Days passed uneventfully, until I noticed her.
Sana.
She lived across the hallway, always seen standing by her balcony in the early mornings, watering her plants with quiet focus. She wasn't stunning in a dramatic way, but she had this delicate composure, like a poem written in cursive. Her hair was usually tied back, her clothes simple, and her eyes never seemed to linger on anything for long. She'd offer a faint smile when our paths crossed, just enough to stir curiosity, but never an invitation. Our first real interaction came over something mundane, a parcel mistakenly delivered to my door. I rang her bell, expecting a quick handoff. Instead, she opened it with surprise, laughed softly at the mix-up, and thanked me with a warm, almost hesitant smile. That small moment carved a space for more. From then on, our exchanges became frequent, borrowing sugar, discussing which floor had the best laundry pressure, sharing awkward laughs in the elevator. There was an ease in how she spoke, not flirtatious but open, like someone used to holding people at arm's length and surprised when they didn't step away. I found myself inventing excuses just to run into her. Offering to carry groceries, helping her adjust a crooked photo frame in her hallway, lending her a novel I'd just finished reading. She read it in 2 days and returned it with thoughtful notes in the margins. Every evening, I'd catch her on the balcony, her fingers brushing against lavender leaves, lost in thought. I started staying out on my own balcony longer, pretending to be on calls or reading, just to be near the gentle rhythm of her presence. But I never said anything. Not directly. There was a fragile balance between us, and I feared tipping it. Then one afternoon, as I walked past her door, I overheard her humming an old song I'd once mentioned loving. It was such a small thing, but it felt intentional. A message wrapped in melody. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing. A letter. Simple, honest, and nervous. I poured my feelings onto paper. How I'd begun to feel alive again. How her kindness filled a silence in me that I hadn't known how to quiet. Over the next few days, I carefully assembled a parcel, her favorite local chocolates, a small hand-painted bookmark, a necklace I thought matched her quiet grace, and that letter. I sealed it gently, my heart packed into cardboard and brown tape. Her birthday was 2 days away. I was finally ready. Or at least I thought I was. Her birthday arrived wrapped in sunlight and spring air. The building buzzed with distant laughter and the scent of someone baking. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the creases of my shirt, parcel in hand, heart pounding like a second heartbeat. I'd rehearsed every possible scenario. Her surprise, her smile, even a polite refusal. But nothing could have prepared me for what actually happened. I knocked gently. It was late afternoon. The golden hour filtered through the hallway windows, softening everything except my nerves. Sana opened the door, her hair loosely braided, wearing a pale blue kurta that somehow made her look more unreachable than usual. She tilted her head at the sight of the parcel. "For you," I said, forcing a smile. "Happy birthday." She accepted it hesitantly, almost like it was heavier than it looked. "Thank you," she replied, voice low, unsure. I didn't linger. I turned before she could ask what was inside, before my courage crumbled into explanations. That night, I waited. Every sound from the corridor made me flinch. I imagined her reading the letter, touching the pendant, smiling at the notes I'd scribbled inside the book cover. I pictured her eyes lighting up, maybe a knock on my door, maybe even a whisper of, "Me too." But the knock came the next morning, and it didn't carry hope. She stood there holding the unopened parcel, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't wear the necklace. Didn't say anything for a moment. Then, softly but firmly, she said, "This is way beyond my range." Each word landed like a blade, measured, deliberate, and final. "I didn't mean to mislead you," she added quickly, "but I can't accept this." I stared at her, my mouth slightly open, as if trying to catch a breath that had already left the room. The parcel rested in her hands like something foreign, like a mistake. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and stepped back inside before I could respond. I stood in the hallway. Parcel returned, heart unraveling in reverse. Shame wrapped around me faster than the rejection itself. It wasn't just about the gift. It was the look in her eyes, the quiet wall she had built between us, brick by brick, behind every smile and every borrowed book. Back inside my apartment, I placed the parcel on the table like something toxic. I didn't open it. I didn't read the letter again. I just sat beside it in silence. Her words echoed endlessly, beyond my range. Was it money? Emotion? Effort? I didn't know. But suddenly, everything between us felt manufactured. One-sided. Fragile. And I began to wonder, had I misunderstood everything? Or had she simply hidden the truth so well that even kindness had become a disguise? The days after her refusal blurred together like rain on a window, quiet, cold, and hard to look through. I stopped opening my curtains. The balcony, once my favorite refuge, now felt like a stage where I'd embarrass myself. The parcel remained untouched on the table, its corners fraying like my thoughts. I avoided her. No more greetings in the hallway. No exchanged smiles at the elevator. Just silence, thick and heavy, filling every shared space between our doors. But silence isn't empty, it has a sound. One night, long past midnight, I heard muffled laughter from across the hall. A man's voice. Deep. Confident. Intimate in a way that required no explanation. I froze, recognizing the kind of laughter that isn't shared with a neighbor. The next morning, I saw them together. He was tall, well-dressed, holding her bag as she locked the door. She smiled at him the way I had dreamed she might smile at me. Not soft or uncertain, but with familiarity, comfort. Her hand briefly rested on his arm, and in that instant, everything inside me broke, not from jealousy, but from clarity. It was never me. Later that week, a mutual neighbor, Mrs. Feroza, the kind of woman who knew everyone's story before they lived it, mentioned casually over the mailboxes, "Did you know Sanaa's getting married next month? Her fiancé's some businessman from Islamabad. Family arrangement, I think, but they seem close already." The words slid into me like cold steel. Fiancé. Married. Close. She had let me hover at the edge of something she'd never planned to let me enter. While I clung to kindness, she had entertained the illusion. Or worse, she had used it. Used me to pass time, to distract herself during a transitional chapter of her life. Suddenly, every moment between us felt different. The borrowed sugar. The long balcony conversations. The book with notes in the margins. Were they signs? Or simply crumbs I'd mistaken for a path? Anger flickered, but it was softer than sorrow. I wasn't angry that she was engaged. I was shattered that she'd let me believe otherwise. That she'd watched me fall and said nothing. That she'd accepted the warmth of my care, even as she belonged to someone else. She hadn't lied, but she hadn't told the truth either. And sometimes, that silence can cut deeper than words ever could. I wanted to confront her. Ask why she never drew the line. Why she let me believe there was something growing between us. But instead, I watched from behind my curtain as she left with him again. For weeks, I lived like a ghost in my own apartment, floating between rooms, going through routines without purpose. The silence that once comforted me now pressed in from all sides. The parcel still sat on the table, unopened, gathering dust and meaning. Then one morning, I woke to birdsong and a sudden, quiet clarity. I got up, showered, and took the parcel in my hands, not to deliver, not to destroy, but to let go. I walked it to the trash chute, paused for a heartbeat, then released it. Not out of anger, out of acceptance. Sanaa's words, "This is way beyond my range," had haunted me. But now, in the absence of emotion, I began to understand. Maybe she hadn't meant money or effort or even emotional weight. Maybe she simply meant she wasn't capable of returning the depth I had offered. Not because she was cruel, but because she never invited it. And I had walked in anyway. I started to rebuild, piece by piece. I joined a local writers group, poured my story into fiction, gave my pain new names. I took long walks, discovered hidden cafes, and slowly, gently, began reintroducing myself to myself. It didn't happen overnight, but healing never does. Months passed. Then, one autumn afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. It was from Sana. She said she didn't know how else to reach out. That she'd read the letter from the parcel after all. That she was sorry, not just for the rejection but for not being honest sooner. She admitted that my presence had been a comfort during a confusing time, and while she appreciated it deeply, she knew she had no right to let it linger without boundaries. She wrote, "I should have said something. But the truth was, I liked the version of myself you saw. And I was afraid of losing it." I read it twice, then folded it quietly and slipped it into a drawer. No fury, no rush of emotion, just a soft ache where something used to live. A week later, I passed her in the hallway for the first time in months. She nodded. I smiled. No bitterness. No unfinished words. Only two people who once shared a fragile moment in time, now on different paths. That evening, I stood on my balcony again. The wind was colder now, rustling through the leaves, and the lavender plant she once tended had withered away. But I didn't mind. Seasons change, and so do people. I looked across and saw her balcony lights off. Empty. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't wonder where she was. Because I finally knew where I was going.